All right. Thanks, Stephen, for joining me for this episode of Leading with Body Intelligence. Let's let's start with having you, for those that may not know who you are,
Okay.
having you introduce yourself to our audience.
Okay. I'd be happy to. I'm Stephen Terrell. I'm a psychotherapist in Austin, Texas, actually in Pflugerville, which is a suburb of Austin. I'm the creator and developer of Transforming Touch, which is a regulation focused modality for working with developmental trauma. I'm the co-author of Nurturing Resilience with Kathy Kain. I'm also a co-author of TEB 123, which is a parenting book that helps parents help their kids get to sleep with a bit of regulation in the evening. And the most important role that I am is an adoptive dad of two sons who are now grown, and they taught me the most of everything. Without a doubt. They have always been my teachers. I had this idea that I was going to raise them, and they ended up raising me. So that's who I am. I teach Transforming Touch all around the world.
Hey, thank you. And I have your book with me,
Ah, that's it.
Nurturing Resilience. And as I was preparing for this interview with you, Stephen, last night, I was going through and I'm like, oh, where do I begin? I have so many sentences and paragraphs highlighted in here.
Excellent. Excellent. I
And
like
where I landed on, since my work with somatic awareness is really focused in the workplace. And so really on chapter 3, how things go awry. And what I highlighted was more than 60% of adults report having experienced some form of abuse during childhood. And
yes.
I'm curious how that shows up in our workplaces.
Well, the 60% is through the adverse childhood experience studies. That's where those numbers came from. It's the most highly researched study ever, is the adverse childhood experience study. Thousands and thousands, like 18,000 participants continue to be in it, and it's way past 20 plus years. The way that our experience, when we've had early developmental trauma or early trauma, childhood, wherever we want to categorize that, in the workplace, it may come up with fawning, coming in just like we would in a regular relationship, a bit of confusion at times, not understanding the rules of engagement in the workplace. Um, Sometimes we see them showing up at almost gossiping in order to try to gain some ground with at least one other person in the workplace. We see this kind of disorganized attachment showing up that can be, oh, I hate this job, or I love this job, or it's the best job I ever had, all the way around to where when we're looking at like avoidant attachment, and we start looking at anxious attachments that all come out of that early experience. The best employee you have could be an anxiously attached employee. They could be the one who gets there early, and they get there, they stay till late. They do everything possible to make everybody's life run really smoothly until they meet someone.
Mhm.
And then they start focusing on the person, and they get distracted and they can't keep up with their job anymore, and they start having more trouble. So in the basic part of any relationship, looking at anxious, where people are afraid of abandonment, afraid of being left behind, afraid of even to the extreme of being killed. I mean, those
Mm.
kind of feelings can show up, all the way to the avoidant who kind of comes to work. Nobody kind of stays aloof. Nobody really knows who the avoidant is. They don't want to share much personal. They're more about as soon as the day is over, they're the first one on the elevator going down to get out of the building, or they're the last because they don't want to interact. They don't want those interactions. They're going home. Oftentimes, when you manage yourself all day, and when we're looking at that from the allostatic load and we're thinking about how much work does it take to keep me calm and safe, many times people are so exhausted after work, they don't have time for any social life. They don't have time for social engagement. There's a great story about a woman who was CEO of a very large computer high-tech company. And when she would get in her car to be driven home, she'd go to sleep and oftentimes just sleep in the driveway. They wouldn't even
Wow.
wake her up. I mean, she would be that exhausted from all of the work it takes because we have these autonomic nervous system, and in it we have a sympathetic response with threat. And if we're in constant threat, then it's gone awry on us. It's not working as it was designed anymore. And when we go into that constant threat, our parasympathetic is supposed to come up and meet it and bring it down and say, everything's fine, everything's calm. And we come into this space of alertness and
Hmm.
awareness. But when we're having excessive amount of threat, that parasympathetic can't find it. It's not doing its job. So it needs like crutches. And so we develop all of these defensive accommodations. We start developing these behaviors. Could be alcohol, drugs. I mean, all of those could be oppositional, could be screaming and yelling, could be fighting, hitting people, could be domestic violence, could be oppositional defiant. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of all the possibilities. And they come down, though, and they support that parasympathetic into better health. And that health is all based on homeostasis, which is what the body decides is the perfect place for your system to run optimally based on your survival. And so there's so many entangled parts in the workplace that we begin to go, oh, well, this person's worked here for 30 years and nobody even knows who they are, all the way to this person was a good employee, a bad employee, a good employee, they're stressed all the time, to this is the best job I ever had, and you're the most wonderful boss, and I love you so much. And then, turns into a not a pleasant relationship eventually. All good things begin to shift when you have developmental trauma. It's hard to maintain status quo. So that's the kind of a quick answer to a long question.
Okay, okay. And I want to dive deeper into that. But before we do, you use the word fawning. Would you
Yes,
define fawning for our listeners, please?
of course. A lot of us know it more by the word people pleasing. It's kind of like, let's just people please. My needs are not as important as your needs because if you're happy, you won't get rid of me. Okay. So fawning is kind of like the same thing. It's not a huge, big difference. It's the same thing. You are the best. And there's a little bit more of an extreme of more prioritization of who you are and me wanting to please you, me really wanting to come in and say, Jennifer, you look so good in that red today, and you should always be wearing that. And oh, you're just, you're the best boss ever. And getting into that fawning, we lose ourselves. We begin to lose ourselves, or at least the shell that we have trying to hide behind begins to
Hmm.
fade. And, it's almost, it's the perfect relationship for an employer who might have a bit of narcissism for lack of other things, because that's the employee they want, because
Mhm.
they can push, 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 and take all the credit.
Yeah.
So there's those power dynamics start showing up really prevalently in the workforce really quickly when we have some,
Mhm.
I have to keep you happy to keep me alive.
Yeah, that takes a lot of energy.
Even to say it, it takes energy. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it does.
exhausting. Yeah.
Yeah. Is fawning the same thing as a freeze response?
No,
No.
but it
Okay.
could be, but is probably within a freeze response.
Okay.
That's kind of the tricky part there. And a freeze response, eh, freeze gets a really strange reputation, the word freeze. And it's the word we've used forever. But freeze, people think, oh, I'm frozen. But
Mm.
it doesn't mean that at all. It means that for this moment, your system is requiring less energy than it normally would require if it were moving and going about. And so it goes into a lower energy, even though there's a double bind to it. And the other bind is it's taking more energy to maintain that freeze. But in that, people get married, get jobs, go to college, graduate, get doctorates. I mean, people move all the way through it. It's just the cost of doing business is higher. One of the things that we know about fawning is that that's where it comes out of. We're going to see it. If you see it, it's almost guaranteed the person's living in freeze, that their sympathetic responses have gone off so many times that they've just adapted to this way of living in this world of freeze. Just costs a lot to do it.
How would you advise leaders in the workplace to, through this lens, to support their employees?
Well, the first thing is that I would advise them to find their own regulation. I would find them to be able to sit with who they are, however that may be showing up. So that's where I'm coming in first. I want them to kind of begin to find their own regulation. And as they find that regulation, looking through this lens of people are doing the best they can.
Mhm.
And if the best they can isn't good enough for you, then you probably should make another change because you're going to get drained trying. If you can take the time and the effort and the energy to look at someone and say, he or she or they're doing the best they can today. They are showing up, they're doing their job, they're really trying, they're putting the effort in, and to be able to support them into understanding that, yeah, you're doing the best you can, and I see it. And sometimes it helps when you see someone struggling, such as, that employee who's getting there not late, but right on time, right on time, right on
Mhm.
time. And you know that they're really struggling to get there on time, but they're getting there on time. Sometimes it helps to realize that, yeah, breaks aren't just a thought. A break is a place where you let the person actually go and break and encourage them to leave their desk. Go into the break room, sit at the break table, have yourself a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a cup of water, whatever it takes, but leave the work area. Go to this place and teaching them how to set their timers on their phones or whatever to help them to be able to get back on time. But really, they need to step away from their desk because if they're sitting there, they cannot leave it because it's part of the process. It's part of the work, part of me pleasing you. Oh, it's okay if I answer the phone while I'm on break. It isn't okay. You really need to go take a break. Oh, it's okay if I help someone. It isn't okay. And
Mhm.
teaching Well, teaching your employees by modeling your own behavior where you're taking breaks,
Yeah.
where you're not working 24/7. There's times where all bosses or all leadership is going to work long hours. We know that. There's times, but to be able to manage that time and be able to say, I gotta go home. I have a family at home. I have somebody waiting for me on the other side when I get out of here. I'm going to
Hmm.
change into a baseball coach or a football coach or whatever. Maybe we're going to go to the ballet. Maybe we're going to do something. And that's important that I understand. And we have this workplace attitude that I hear a lot about of people saving their vacations and having weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of vacation. Take your vacation. Take your vacation. Well, what do? I wouldn't have anything to do if I don't go to work. Well, maybe you just watch television. I don't know. Do something. Go for a
Hmm.
walk. Walk outside in the morning and start seeing what the sun looks like when it comes up. Walk barefoot on wet dew grass. Ground yourself a bit. You know,
Hmm.
figure out how you can land within yourself and not despise yourself.
Yeah, and not despise yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there must be something wrong. I'm the bad person. There's something wrong with me. You're just so wonderful to hire me, and I'm just so grateful that let me do whatever. It doesn't work. It burns people out, or it makes people live, you know, we know without in the research that early childhood trauma, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, thyroid, cancer, all of those things increase to as much as 10 to 15 years earlier death without any sort of resolve. That's a lot. That's
That
the
is a
person
lot.
dying at 60 instead of 75 or 80, dying at 70 instead of, 85 or 90. It's cutting life. And so many people struggle with their health and their diet. We see how many diets can people go on? Yo, 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 yo. Yeah, trying to be someone else.
Right.
It's just a
Right.
struggle. Just a struggle.
What difference would it make in a company culture if there were more awareness and support around this important matter?
Huge, huge. I think that if you look, the tech companies that came out in the late 80s, early 90s, those tech companies started showing up all over the place, especially here in Austin. We had them on every corner. They would have basketball in the afternoon, or they would have ping pong or something. And they did a lot of group building, a lot of let's
Mhm.
go to the movies together on Friday afternoon. And, they were doing a lot of that. And that's kind of the culture that we see with really successful corporations. Apple still does it.
Mhm.
Microsoft, those big corporations still take time for their employees to give them some sort of team building, something that they can do. And some people, even though they're offered that, they can't tolerate it, so they go home. Those are the ones that are sliding under they're out of sight. No one's seeing them.
How can leaders support them? Or, see them first of all, and then support them.
Well, that's a really good question. You know, I think they got to see them first
Hmm.
to figure out that, oh yeah, everyone who works for me isn't alike. And I don't have a bunch of, there's not a lot of cattle, and even cattle isn't all alike. So,
Hmm.
everyone's not alike, and to be able to hone in on what somebody might be good at, the avoidant might be good at taking call in the evening. If someone has to take call, they may be better at that than the anxious who's going to sit and worry about a call coming in. Being able to lean into the strengths that many see as deficits. By leaning
Yeah.
into the strengths and seeing you just to be seen, it's scary because an avoidance and avoided because they don't want to be seen. That's the exact opposite of what they want. So giving them, realizing that, oh yeah, maybe this person is going to do better with an independent task. Maybe they're not going to do so well in the group at first. Maybe it's going to take them longer to warm up to their coworkers.
Hmm.
Maybe they're not going to be immediate, and maybe those icebreaker games. When you look at the avoidant, you go, oh no, that poor person could not do another icebreaker game, no matter what. No, get away from it. And they don't really care what color their rainbow is or their parachute. They're not looking for that. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking not to be seen, but to do a good job.
Hmm.
They're no different than anyone else. Their nervous system, they get the same kudos. They just may not respond the same, but their insides are all running the same. They're not running different than some
Hmm.
anxious. So
How would a leader approach someone that maybe they're concerned about, but someone who's hesitant and doesn't feel safe being seen? How can a leader make a first connection?
slowly,
Uh-huh.
slowly get the facts out first. Get the job performance, the expectation, all of that in line first.
Hmm.
Where they know what they're supposed to be doing. And then it's about seeing someone walking by your door and inviting them in for a moment. Just a moment. How are things going? Good. Less um less eyes on them for a while.
Yeah.
Kind of letting them figure it out instead of coming in and saying, well, this has worked for other people. You need to do this too. Realizing that sometimes those folks have a whole different way of doing it that's better than everybody else's, but nobody knows it until
Right.
they're given the chance. So they
Hmm.
they can't be diamonds in the rough, they could be that one diamond employee that we didn't even know was there. And being able to take the time to build that, and walking in and seeing them in the break room and sitting at the table next to them and
Hmm.
having a conversation, not at the table with them, but next to them, to where there's enough space to where nobody's feeling like, oh, I must have done something wrong. Because that is the employee that when you say, Jennifer, I need to see you in my office today at 3 o'clock. And it's 9 o'clock in the morning. From 9 o'clock to 3, they think they're getting fired.
Yep.
And it's not about you're going to call them in and give them an award. You're going to give them an award, just give them the award at 9 a.m. and get it over with. Don't, setting them up for failure doesn't work. When you
Yeah.
start saying, let's put something into the future, get it on the books, let's do this, doesn't work. Giving them that information quicker.
Yes. And what kind of language can they use? Because I've seen this with a couple of my friends and colleagues. They were just torn up inside with worry because they received a message from their boss that was very vague. We need to talk.
Yeah.
What is a best practice for leaders to invite that conversation, but in a way that gives the recipient enough to go on that they don't start making up scary narratives.
Yeah. Sometimes I think just to acknowledge to the person and say, it's nothing bad.
Mhm.
I just want to check in with you on some things, something like that, or really just wait till closer to time.
Yeah.
Don't schedule it 6 or 7 hours ahead of time, or even 3 hours. Get it down to the hour and say, why don't let's have a conversation, and being able to say, but for the person, there are those basic, let me find my feet are on the floor type of techniques. And
Hmm.
sometimes something just occurred. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here
And you see me.
and I see you.
Okay, well then that's interesting because I lost all video, disappeared, but
Oh,
we'll keep moving right up. Oh, there it is. You're back. Oh,
huh.
apologize for that. See, for that moment, I thought you left me.
I'm right
That's
here,
how
Stephen.
that's how quick it can happen to someone. I mean, that
Yes.
rapidly. And giving people that encouragement to drink water. Water really can calm us, and it calms our brain. Telling the individual, not the boss, but the individuals, drink plenty of water. Bring that water on board to where you're not feeling um, any sort of parched, where you've got your whistle is wet and you can think. If you've got fluid in your mouth, you have water on your brain. And those two combinations can bring about a bit of resolution. But the truth is, if they're going to feel bad. They're going to feel bad if there isn't a marker in place that says, we're just going to talk.
Yeah,
And, after about the 50th time, they'll believe them a little bit more, but it
that's
will
true.
take some repeated time. And it's a good thing to just set up really times you don't need to meet with them and do
Mm,
some run throughs where they don't know it, but you know it, where they begin to find you're approachable and you're not the disciplinarian. You're not the,
yes,
you're not going to hurt me.
that you're safe with them.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Stephen Terrell, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
My pleasure to have you. And I just really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with our business community.
Thank you for asking. It is a community that I don't only work in, I live in, and I was raised in. So I
Yeah,
understand it inside out, the outside in, and all the way around. So thank you for giving me an opportunity.
absolutely.